All right, welcome everyone. Regulation has been definitely the biggest topic, or one of the biggest topics of the year in crypto. And here we have some of the most prominent voices to talk about it. So very fortunate to be here. Let's start with just talking about the huge shift in the environment that we've seen just in the last few months. So we went through a period where there was honestly just like hostility, like outright hostility against crypto, especially in the US. And now that has completely changed. To all the panelists, if you can describe what the regulatory environment is like today in the US and globally, what does kind of the overall landscape look like? And let's start with David.
Sure. Thanks very much for the question. And thank you to the organizers for including Circle and myself. I think if I look at the landscape and I had to kind of really summarize what's the way to really encapsulate the shift, I think it's a shift from if to how. And what I mean by that is it's no longer an existential question around whether we should have, certainly I'm speaking specifically around stablecoins. It's yes, this technology makes sense. There's real world utility in it. It can really add value to the ecosystem and to economies. So it's now shifted to, now how do we A, regulate this? And then how do we integrate it into the financial system? And so the passage and signing into law of the Genius Act, I think really puts an exclamation point on a trend that's been happening the last 3 to 5 years. And I think it's important to kind of reflect on that. If you were to go back 5 years ago, there was very little, we're at the very, very proto beginning of regulatory regimes being thought about. MiCA was being discussed, but didn't yet exist. And it's been this movement now to develop increasingly these formal rules of the road for digital assets and for stablecoin. And if you juxtapose that against traditional finance, the amount of progress we've made in the last sort of 5 years has actually been quite remarkable. There's certainly more work to be done. We can talk about that as we go on, but enormous progress has been made. And the last thing I'd note, I think, is this different taxonomies and recognition of asset classes and the separation of them across digital assets, I think is becoming more clear as the rules. So you have a clearer rules around digital assets developing, clearer rules around things that are sort of categorized as more as like a commodity versus a security, and more clear rules and taxonomy developing around stablecoins.
Perfect. Jason, what do you think?
So for the last 8 years in the United States, the answer to most crypto questions was very simple. The answer was no, you cannot do that here. You'd have to go abroad to do it somewhere else. Now that's changed. We've obviously had a giant change. For some reason, I can't really remember what happened in the United States that changed that. It's the last panel of the afternoon. We have to tell jokes. So with that change, we have a new set of problems. And the problem, exactly as David said, is, okay, how are we going to do that? We're now starting what we should have done in 2015 and 2016, looking at the laws, the regulations as they currently exist and thinking, does any of this actually map onto the regulatory model that we have? And in many ways it does, and in many ways it does not. So we're currently grappling with how to work out all of this, short of passing big market structure legislation, which has passed the House in the US, but has not passed the Senate. I'm frankly not that optimistic. Short of that legislation, we have to figure out how to deal with the current regulations. Some of that could be no action letters. We've seen a couple of those come out recently. Some of it could be exemptive relief. And I know that myself and a number of people in the room are actively working for that. But it's going to be a long, hard road because there's still a lot of uncertainty.
Interesting. Wasi?
I think the best way to explain this is that, let's say as early as, a year ago, 2 years ago, if anyone came to me and said, hey, man, I want to do NFTs on chain, I want to do a governance token, I want to do a tokenized hedge fund, I'd be, no fucking way, man. Absolutely not. You're getting straight to jail. And now if someone goes like, hey, I'm doing a token attachment, I'm like, yeah, man, let's fucking go. When are we issuing the token? When are we issuing the governance tokens, you know? Well, it's definitely been a shift in the regulatory regime. I almost feel like it's almost gone a bit too far the other way, to be honest. I mean, it was too extreme to start with. Initially, it was the case that no matter how legitimate or the argument that your token wasn't a security is, it didn't matter. Because if Gary Gensler decides it's a security, you're fucked. You know, you're going to spend your entire VC funding defending the SEC. Now, on the other hand, it's almost gotten a bit too egregious, where people are saying, hey, you don't just do whatever the hell, like crime is legal for the extreme,
Yeah.
you just do everything. So it's kind of gone almost too far the other way. But I'm not sure that's a great thing. I think like the pendulum probably comes back over time as the regulatory regime sort of becomes a bit more stable, you know, as political environment in America becomes more stable. Because the thing is that, I mean, I work out of Singapore, right? I mean, I practice, I'm an English lawyer. I do Cayman law, BVI law, Singapore law across the board. And what tends to happen is that we all follow the US's lead at the end of the day. If the US is aggressive to crypto, you expect pretty much the rest of the world to be more, you know, aggressive towards crypto. Whereas as the US is more lax about it, you also see places like Singapore and so on relaxing. Even if they might be passing legislation, the enforcement is nowhere as aggressive.
Yeah, that's a great segue to my next question, which was exactly that. Have we gone too far on the other way? And you seem to say, yes, it has gone too far. I think it's even become a meme, like, is this the crime cycle? So yeah, what are your thoughts there, Jason?
So surprisingly, law still exists, right? People should not commit crimes. I know there seems to be this attitude, well, the enforcers have backed way off, and to be fair, they have, but they're still very active in fraud and other kinds of criminal activity. So people do need to be pretty careful. The pendulum hasn't, I think, so much swung as it's kind of been picked up and smashed into pieces, and we're trying to figure out how to put all that stuff back together. I frequently remind my clients that the statute of limitations for pretty much anything they're doing is longer than the current administration. So they can't be absolutely assured that anything that they're doing is going to be completely okay from now on. I think it really requires people to take a thoughtful look at whether they're doing things correctly under the law, where are the gray areas, and they have to take calculated regulatory risks. I think some of that some of that goes too far, and that's what gives us the crime season vibes. But this is not legal advice, but it kind of is legal advice. People, please don't commit crimes.
That's generally good advice. Yeah. David, what do you think?
Yeah, well, look, I think first of all, I'm going to say something that's probably a bit of heresy in this venue, which is that if you kind of reflect on the evolution of digital assets at the early stages, the idea was we're going to operate kind of outside of formal rules, and we're going to kind of build our own economy without regulation. And you had a lot of innovation happen. We have about 2.7 now, I guess, trillion in Bitcoin market cap, and another 1.3 another. So that's pretty good. Almost $4 trillion in economic activity outside of regulatory environments. But honestly, that's a pretty small a number compared to the real economy. And I think the big headline story is that actually, as we have regulation coming in, we're going to see even more innovation than we saw when we didn't have it. In addition, when everything was outside regulation, it was all in a gray zone. It actually was I would argue, a more conducive environment to criminal activity. And while we certainly still have criminal activity in the context of regulated environments, it's a pretty small number compared to the total activity, number one. And number two, this is really important. When you start to move the economy into a regulated space and you have rules of the road, you can start to separate gray zone activity and really bad activity from good activity. And everyone in the ecosystem and in law enforcement can start focusing more on the really bad behavior that we need to address. And I think you're seeing that happen as you have more institutions building in compliance, KYC, AML. You're starting to be able to see that zeroing in on the activity that people want to bleed out of the system. And I think that's really quite an important set of developments for us as an industry.
For sure. It seems like before the Trump administration, the idea was that, okay, there are no rules, but implicitly everything's illegal. And now it seems like, okay, there are some rules, like we do have the Genius Act, but we're missing a lot more kind of rules of the road, but implicitly, like, everything is not illegal. So I think there needs to be, I think, more regulations in different aspects of crypto for what you said, for like more economic activity to move on chain in a more legitimate way.
Well, and I think as you have more institutional players coming into this space, there's going to be a rationale for continuing to clean up the marketplace and a demand and an expectation that happen.
Yeah. Okay, so continuing with you, David, this question specifically for you, because you've been, a USDC with Circle has kind of led the way on kind of the compliant way of issuing stable coins. So from kind of this front seat into regulatory environments globally, where do you think, who's kind of like leading the way, really kind of taking a good approach to crypto regulations and stable coins, and who would you say, or like which jurisdictions are falling behind?
Yeah. So I think that, as I kind of mentioned at the outset, I think we've come a long way, and I think there's a number of keystone jurisdictions that have put in place rules and regulations. And obviously, again, that exclamation point is the Genius Act, but it doesn't. Well, it might stand kind of very prominently. It doesn't stand alone. And if you think about the MiCA rules in the EU, obviously Genius in North America, Japan putting in place their own stablecoins framework. Here in Singapore, there's a framework for digital assets. Hong Kong has put in place their rules. What you start to kind of see, and you have this in the Gulf as well, Abu Dhabi and Dubai, you're starting to see this, all of the tier one global financial centers putting in place some form of rules of the road. There's some still coming online. I know, like, China's sitting on the sidelines watching very closely. We'll see what they do. India is as well. And while there are certainly differences among these regimes, I would say the similarities are actually more striking, because I think you have a convergence of what does it mean to have a properly constructed and regulated stablecoin. And there's some really common features that stand out, and that's the one-for-one asset backing with high-quality liquid assets. They should be custodied in a high-quality, safe institution. There should be third-party attestation on a regular basis with a high level of transparency. There should be strong redemption rights. The assets should be held in kind of simple ownership for the benefit of the token holders. They're not commingled with corporate assets. And so these features, are really important. And that's alongside this strong compliance regime that makes sure that there's real protection for the holders of the token. And I think all of the regimes have some variation of these types of attributes. So I think that's a really, really positive set of developments. And I think that's working really well. I think globally, some other features that we see working very well are where there's a recognition of foreign issue stable coins to be able to circulate in a market. And conversely, where we see things not working as well is where you don't have that recognition of foreign issued, kind of the building walled gardens and very localized requirements that risk fragmenting the system. And so, there's still areas for improvement.
Great, but it's important that you point out that at least like in these major economies, there's more similarities and differences, and important to have that for like stablecoins to be composable globally and so on.
Yeah, but I think interoperability will be the next big area of focus to make sure that we don't have walled gardens, that you can move tokens across chains. So for example, we have a cross-chain transfer protocol. Others have their own solutions to allow for that movement of money, because I think that's going to be very important to unlock the true utility of the tokens.
Totally. Jason, so you've been, advising crypto startups and companies for many years. You went through the whole regulation by enforcement kind of era of the SEC, and now like we've talked about this like huge shift that's happened. What's your recommendation to your clients, to companies building in crypto? Is the US a good place to be right now?
Yeah, the short answer is the United States is a great place to be building right now. There are still advantages that other places might have, more developed law in this particular area, tax advantages. But obviously, the United States is the largest and most liquid market in the world. We've got lots of cash. We've got lots of talent. It's a great place to be building. And now, which is much different than it has been, we've got a more permissive type of environment. For the SEC, which I spent 8 years fighting every single day. Now we have a crypto task force, which is a bunch of very smart people in a room who are working very hard trying to get to the right result. They're not just saying, yes, go do whatever you want. They're really trying to figure out where the new technology has mooted the need for particular regulations to try to figure out whether we can do something smarter about those regulations. So a lot of praise is due for the crypto task force, and hopefully the rest of the SEC comes along. We're starting to see some activity. I'd love to see more activity in the form of exemptions or further no action letters. But right now, it's a good time to be building in the United States. That doesn't mean you can't build in the rest of the world. We're seeing the rise of dual structures, folks who take advantage of the beneficial tax treatment in the Caymans, but also take advantage of the pool of talent and capital in the United States. And those are some really interesting projects, and in some ways, the best way to build.
Awesome. Wasi, so specifically about DeFi, I'd love to hear your thoughts on where you think regulation should go on the more kind of permissionless, self-custody, like on-chain side of crypto, because that, there's definitely like lots of differences from what, in general, what we've been talking about. It seems like it's just harder to regulate that side of crypto. So
I fully agree. I think it's harder to regulate, and it's a question of whether it should be regulated even. I think the crypto industry is sort of going to split into two, I think, where you have this like very regulated traditional finance, where people are looking at crypto as like a technology, better for settlements, better for trading, so on and so forth. And then you have the other side, which is DeFi, which is really more of like a social cultural movement, I think, at the end of the day. It genuinely is we're going to build our own economy with blackjack and hookers, right? Where it's going to be different from, traditional finance. You could try and regulate it, right? You try and regulate the on-ramps and off-ramps and so on and so forth. But it's very hard to regulate DeFi itself, because the people in there, they want to trade with each other. The bigger problem, if people say they want to regulate DeFi, the real issue here is when the two worlds kind of collide a little bit. Because when you've got DeFi people who are deep in DeFi, and they're trading coins in DeFi, borrowing against their assets, doing stuff, they lose their money. They're like, you know what, I took the risk because I understand the technology, and so on and so forth. The difficulty is when people who build these sort of products want the liquidity from retail, and they try and go to Korea, or they try to go to the US, and they want to sell it through Coinbase, through Kraken, through Binance, to people that don't know what they're buying. And that's when you start that's when you kind of really have a regulator, because you have to regulate and protect retail. But I feel when people have enough sophistication and enough education to go onto DeFi, custody your own wallet, buy whatever, token that you want to buy, it's kind of almost on you, really. And we could try and regulate it. It'd be very difficult, and I don't think regulation actually solves the problem.
what about things like, okay, because I think there's a stark difference between crypto where you're self-custodying and crypto where you're trusting a third party, a centralized entity to custody your assets. So I think that's like a clear definition,
Correct.
distinction that we could.
Absolutely. The big issue is when you say I'm DeFi, but it's really some multi-sig wallet or a single wallet that everyone sends funds to. That's not DeFi. If it's a smart contract that's actually immutable and I send token A and token B comes out no matter what, then fine, that's DeFi. But if you say, oh, I'm building a DeFi protocol, send me all your money and I've got 1 billion TVL, but it's all my wallet, you know, it's not DeFi, is it?
Yeah, yeah.
Then you should be regulated.
Right. I agree with you that there's this like gray area that's really hard to deal with. Like, okay, like multi-sig is a great example. I think like exploits too, like is code law, like or should people who are purposely treating code in a way to steal funds,
Yes.
and like using those loopholes, like should that be regulated? There's
I
like
think if it's straight
like
up fraud,
insider
so-
trading, obviously pump and dumps on meme coins, like, you know, things like that where it's like, okay, it's DeFi, it's permissionless, sure, but like it feels like, you know, there's obviously room to set some.
No, absolutely. I think
Yeah.
if you go to a casino and you start gambling and lose your money, you don't try to sue the casino, basically.
Yeah.
But if you go to the casino and you get robbed as you exchange your chips, you certainly should be going after the casino.
Yeah.
I mean, no matter what, whether this DeFi specific regulation or not, fraud is never legal. So if you've got someone dishonestly creating a protocol to steal everyone's funds, just because DeFi isn't regulated doesn't make it legal. That's
Right.
fraud, and they should go to jail.
Perfect. Okay, to start wrapping up, I'd love for the panel to look forward. We've, you know, as we've laid the ground here, definitely made a lot of progress in just a few months in crypto. But what's coming? Like what regulation would you want to see? What bills need to be passed for the industry to continue growing? David.
Well, certainly looking first at the United States, as exciting as the Genius Act is, there is the need to pass a market infrastructure bill. So for Genius covers stablecoin, and we at Circle like that, but there's obviously many, many other digital assets that still do not have formal legal coverage in the United States. So I think you have a very open debate right now in the US. Hopefully that will be resolved in the near future. In addition, I think there are a lot of need, I think, to develop more and harmonized approaches on critical areas of digital assets and stablecoins, in particular areas around compliance. What is a internationally recognized standard for KYC, AML, CTF? I did a lot of work ongoing in venues like IOSCO and FSB, EIS. I think that's actually going to be really important. I said at the outset that, you know, we're still early days, and I think rightly the industry is impatient. These organizations tend not to move quickly, but we need them. I think if we're going to have proper fungibility of tokens, proper interoperability, it's great to have the national rules, but we do need some agreements that are truly cross-border. And so I think a lot of work needs to be done there. A third area that I think is going to be very important is we have a very US dollar token dominated ecosystem right now, and that's okay, right? I mean, we issue a US dollar token, so that's not bad for us. But I think for us to have a truly global ecosystem, what we'd love to see, and I hope we think we will see, are more and more national currencies developing their own stable coins, because then you could really start developing a true global ecosystem. You could start migrating elements of traditional finance into the digital realm, whether that's FX, smooth movement at the border and cross the border when you have native tokens and national currencies that you can convert with. So I think that's and the fourth thing I want to mention very quickly that we don't talk about enough, I think, in these kinds of conferences, and wassielawyer, I think you mentioned this a bit, that's the programmability aspect of tokens. I think there's huge potential in the technology. We talk a lot about the utility of it. Huge potential in the conversion of currencies to software, making them subject to if-then statements. Infinite possible uses. As many apps as you can imagine on your iPhone, we can have apps for money. I think we need to start thinking to the next phase of growth. What are the rules of the road for developing software-based money solutions that we can all benefit from? And I think that's incredibly, in my mind, the most exciting element of the technology.
Yeah, I think to accomplish that, I'm hoping for two things to be happening simultaneously. One, I sort of like and welcome the move of traditional finance and traditional financial models, regulations, KYC into the crypto space. It sort of is bringing a professionalization and internationalization to the space that will make it hard to dislodge. So if the United States pendulum swings back the other way, but 3 years from now, we've got crypto fairly well lodged in and embedded into the traditional financial markets through traditional financial institutions, it's going to be very hard to dislodge. Like you're not stuffing that back in the can. On the other hand, many of us got into crypto because we don't like the big traditional banks and the financial institutions. And I think if crypto basically becomes all the big financial institutions, but crypto, we have failed, right? We have failed to do what we came here to do, which is disrupt industries and disintermediate some of the rent-seeking intermediaries. So, you know, I'm rooting for the big financial institutions to normalize this so that it's here to stay. But I'm also rooting for, you know, our degens, our DeFi developers, our software coders, our you know, insane, crazy people, the meme coiners, the perverts, everyone out there who's doing the stuff that's below the radar outside that system. I'm rooting for them too. And I'm hoping for their success, because that's what will keep the energy going in this industry and really start to push the programmability. I don't want residential mortgage-backed securities just tokenized. Like, that's cool, great, whatever.
Yeah.
But, you know, I want new and interesting programmable money that you control yourself. That's cool. And that's what I'm here for.
Totally. Yeah.
I think that DeFi needs to grow up a bit, and we need to start self-regulating. There needs to be sort of rules of engagement even in the DeFi space itself. Instead of saying either, you know, oh, everything's regulated, I hate everything, or like regulations are gone, crime is legal. I think we need to start setting standards for ourselves, because DeFi is in this place where we almost have like a tragedy of the common situation, where people are getting increasingly aggressive about attacking a pool of liquidity. So a lot of them retail liquidity that is on DeFi, without thinking of how to keep this going. So I've always thought it was a missed opportunity, because I felt that a lot of the industry stalwarts, you know, exchanges and so on and so forth, should be the ones coming together, self-regulating, saying, these are the standards. You know, if you don't get X amount of audits, if you know it's not sufficiently decentralized, we're not listing this token. We're not selling to retail. We're not integrating your chain. But the exchanges aren't doing that. They're sort of saying, oh, you know, you get a legal opinion from some random lawyer in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, fine, we'll list it. We'll sell it to whoever the hell you want to sell it to. I think when you want to build your own economy, it also means taking responsibility for it. It means coming here and saying that these are the participants in our industry that we care about. We believe that this is the future of money, but there are rules of engagement. And we are going to set those rules of engagement because we understand it the best. Why are we waiting for some senator or someone in the US to think about DeFi when we are living and breathing it? We know what a scammy contract is. We know what a scammy pump and dump is. You know, maybe people need to get together and say, we're not listing this. We're not trading this. We're not working with people like that. And that's how I think DeFi grows up, when we show that we're responsible people and we can regulate ourselves.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more with all of you guys. What a great panel. I think, well, yeah, I'm always rooting for the degens as well. I think it's absolutely the case that, well, with more freedom comes more responsibility, and I think that's what we're seeing now. Crypto has more freedom to add, but now I think it's a great point. The industry needs to set its own rules because it understands this economy better. So hopefully, you know, this is kind of this next stage of the Wild West that's not so wild anymore. It's becoming more institutional. So anyways, thank you so much to all the panelists, and thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.